found out my wife was cheating on me during a writer's retreat. So, I hired a private investigator, gathered evidence, and vanished completely before she returned. My name is Andrew Baker, but my friends call me AB, never Andy. There's always some annoying drunk or clueless guy who tries to get too familiar and calls me Andy. So, Andy, what do you do for a living, they'll ask. I usually reply, I design a nifty little gadget that allows police officers to check if someone's drunk from 40 feet away. They're even starting to install them on traffic cameras around the city. That usually shuts them up and gets them to back off. But in case you haven't guessed, that gadget isn't real. It's just my way of showing I have little patience for nonsense. Lie to me, and things get worse. I'm a simple guy, nothing complicated. I like a straightforward life and find satisfaction in my work. I'm an engineer at a major national company with offices across the country. I've got friends, and even though I'm not much of a drinker, I'll have a beer now and then. Honestly, I prefer nachos, but that's my curse. If I let myself go, I gain weight. So I try to stay in good shape for my age. I used to sail whenever I could, but having a wife and 2 young daughters eventually ate up all my time. I sold my boat. That was just one of the sacrifices I willingly made over the years so I could spend quality time with the people who really matter to me. I've been happily married to Karen for 25 years. She's a high school teacher. Our 2 daughters are now in college. Claire is studying at Brown University in Rhode Island, and her younger sister Denise is at Boston University. I probably couldn't have afforded those expensive schools, but thankfully the girls are hardworking students and earn scholarships. We live in North Carolina, in an area known as the Research Triangle. It's centered around some excellent universities in Raleigh and surrounded by cutting-edge tech companies. It's a great place to live and work. I could go on about Carolina barbecue, but that would just make me hungry. I was a little disappointed when the girls chose schools up north, but I understood. They needed to explore beyond their comfort zone, and in the end, that's a good thing. Our daughters are amazing young women, smart, funny, and charming, with strong moral values. I worry about their safety every day, but I trust their judgment. Watching them grow and take their first real steps toward independence meant that my wife and I would finally have time to ourselves again. I'd been looking forward to this phase for a long time. With both girls away at college, I imagined coming home each night to a loving wife who was focused on me, and I on her. I imagined reconnecting, leading to days filled with joy, almost like newlyweds again. I pictured us enjoying dinners out, seeing plays and movies, and finally rediscovering each other in the way I'd always hoped. However, reality didn't quite unfold the way I had imagined. To be honest, looking back on that first year as empty nesters, I noticed that Karen was changing. Her interests seemed to shift. At first, I thought these changes were her way of blossoming now that our daughters no longer lived at home. But eventually, I realized I was witnessing a significant shift in her values and priorities. Karen is an English teacher who specializes in creative writing. To be fair, she's also a frustrated writer. As a young mom and teacher, she never really had the chance to write the way she wanted. During the summers and whenever she could steal an hour or 2, Karen devoted time to writing, but not much ever came of it. She used to submit her essays and short stories to literary magazines, only to build up a collection of rejection letters. The great masterpiece she dreamed of never quite materialized. I'll admit, I enjoy reading her writing, but as a writer, she never moved beyond formulaic and sometimes overly dramatic stories. She has a romanticized view of what it means to be a writer, and I secretly suspect she's more drawn to the idea of being a writer than to the writing itself. Still, if she's happy, I'm happy. For most of our marriage, Karen's been a member of several writing groups. These are gatherings where people meet to help each other out by offering feedback, suggestions, and discussions about their work, with the goal of improving everyone's writing. Some of these groups seemed genuinely productive to me, while others felt more like mutual admiration societies. Her most recent group, the one she was part of when everything fell apart, had elements of both. They rotated between meeting at each other's homes, and when they gathered at our place, I made a point to give them space. I tried joining them once, but Karen and a few others disapproved, so I stopped trying. Karen's current writing group consists of about 10 members, both men and women. Some of them are pleasant, and I genuinely enjoy their company. Others, frankly, I could do without. Half of them are fairly unremarkable, while the other half leave a lasting impression when you meet them. For example, Reggie, a woman, is heavily involved in writing both stories and biographies. She conducts actual research and writes books with an academic edge, yet still manages to engage readers. I've read all of her books and genuinely enjoyed them. Then there's Betty, who has a soft spot for fantasy. I don't think she imagines herself as the next J.K. Rowling. She leans more toward talking unicorns and whimsical tales. She's friendly, and her writing seems mostly for her own enjoyment, and who can argue with that? Bill plays the role of the group's know-it-all. A little of that goes a long way, but otherwise, he seems okay. And then there's someone named Frank. I got a bad feeling the first time I met him, and those internal alarms haven't stopped ringing since. When I met Frank, it was clear that I was being introduced to him rather than the other way around. He looked me over and asked, "So, Andy, what do you do for a living?" I glanced at my wife, who gave me a faint smile and shook her head. I simply replied, "I'm an engineer." Frank smiled, but it felt more like a grimace than a genuine grin. As I mentioned, I gave up trying to be involved with their group. Instead, I stayed somewhat hidden and kept a low profile, though not entirely out of earshot. When they met at our house, I was often in the next room, working quietly, or out back on the patio with a window cracked open just enough to hear their conversation, at least until they forgot I was nearby. From the very beginning, I noticed something off about the way Frank interacted with Karen. They seemed to share inside jokes and a kind of connection that made me uneasy. Sometimes, he'd flatter her, and other times, it felt like he understood her private thoughts in a way I didn't appreciate. He'd refer to past conversations that seemed to be just between them, and I got the sense that the rest of the group wasn't in on those moments. It was just a feeling, but I didn't like it, and I told her as much. She brushed off my concerns, and I learned not to press the issue. I made sure she understood how I felt, the rest was up to her. The group followed a familiar routine during their meetings. After the writing sessions, they'd unwind with some wine and relax. That's usually when I'd start to notice the phoniness. It was around mid-spring semester, early March, when the conversation shifted to the lifestyles of real writers. "Oh, you know, all the famous writers were alcoholics." That's right, they'd write in the mornings and drink in the afternoons and evenings. It relaxes the mind, opens it up to new ideas. So by morning, the creativity just flows, and they begin to write. Actually, truly accomplished writers have all experienced romantic affairs. That's what really fuels them, Frank was saying. Thanks for sharing, Frank. I'm beginning to understand where you're coming from, Karen replied, and her words hit me like a punch in the gut. Oh, absolutely. It's the intensity and emotion of the unknown, the thrill of keeping it all hidden from everyone. That's where true inspiration lies. Some of them laughed. Others didn't. I convinced myself it was just a joke, but I stayed alert for the rest of their conversation. Maybe we should all have a wild night of passion someday, and then each of us can write the next great American novel, Bill chimed in. I couldn't tell if he meant it as a joke or not. Character flaws don't form the foundation for great writing. What really builds extraordinary stories are things like humanity, empathy, and confronting the mysteries of the unknown, said Betty. Have I mentioned I liked Betty? Unforgettable stories are about overcoming adversity, fighting for greatness against all odds, and leaving the world a better place than you found it, Reggie added. Well, maybe if you cast the right spell, we can skip all the hassle, that idiot Frank added again. Unfortunately, a few people chuckled at that. I'm not sure Betty did, and I had a hunch Reggie didn't either. They kept talking about drinking habits and writers' affairs, and I continued listening, giving no hint that I was paying attention. Then I caught a rather intriguing part of their conversation. Is anyone else planning to apply for the Illinois Writers' Workshop this summer? Frank asked again. Oh, I already submitted my application. Fingers crossed they accept me. 6 weeks of just writing and workshopping with other writers could really be a turning point for me, Karen said, and that was the first I'd heard of it. Frank picked up on that immediately. I'm sure they'll accept you. Your writing has improved so much over the past year. I think you'll get in. I applied too, though I'm not so sure they'll take me. My internal BS radar was screaming. Really, Frank? When did you become so modest? I didn't like what I was hearing. But at that point, I still deeply cared for and trusted my wife. When you've been married as long as we have, trust is everything. You don't even consider the possibility that she might be up to something. The thought doesn't cross your mind. Marriage is a partnership, and your wife is your other half. She had shown her commitment year after year, and all you really want is for her to find the happiness and success she deserves, or at least, that's what you believe. So later, when everything falls apart, it hits you even harder, because the betrayal breaks something that was supposed to be unshakable. Update 1. Over time, I allowed myself to set aside the conversation I'd overheard that night. As I mentioned, I fully trusted my wife. Some younger guys might not understand that, but after more than 20 years of marriage, trust becomes a way of life rather than just a choice. It was late April, and I had just finished working in the garden outside when I decided to wrap up the day and head in. As I reached the kitchen door, I caught my wife on the phone, saying, I can't wait, 6 whole weeks with no responsibilities, no commitments, and no one expecting me to come back. That last part caught my attention. I froze in place and listened. Absolutely, it's going to be the most self-indulgent 6 weeks of my life. I deserve it, and so do you. None of it sat right with me. I pushed the door open and walked into the kitchen. Karen looked startled. Well, I have to go. AB just got in and I need to start dinner, she said, hanging up quickly. Who was that on the phone? I asked. Oh, just Reggie. We were talking about the end of the school year. As if, I thought. I wanted to confront her about the things I'd heard, especially the part about no one expecting me to come back, but I had a feeling honesty might be in short supply that evening. My mood darkened, but I tried to hide it for now. Later that night, after dinner, the next bomb dropped. AB, you won't believe the fantastic news I got today. Remember that writer's workshop in Illinois I applied for? No, of course I didn't. You barely talked to me. To be honest, I had heard about the workshop, but only because I'd overheard her talking about it that night over a month ago. I don't remember you mentioning it. I did mention it. I applied to a 6-week writer's workshop from mid-June to the end of July at the University of Illinois. They have lectures with their faculty and bring in experienced authors for seminars and discussion groups, and then we do tons of writing. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I got accepted. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'm sure we can work it out financially. Maybe I can take a little time off work and join you. I'd love to sit in on those author lectures. Her reaction seemed surprised. Oh, well, we can think about it. It's going to be a really intense 6-week period and I won't have much free time to spend with you. My instincts were alert again. Well, you know I'm not demanding. Maybe I can be the group's coffee guy. She gave a slightly nervous smile. That could be nice, honey. Let's see how it plays out. I'd heard that kind of response before, and I knew what it meant. She was already making sure I wouldn't be going to Illinois with her. I get the feeling you'd rather I didn't go with you. Oh, no, it's not that. I'm just worried you'd be bored. You like computers and circuits, and this is all writers talking about big ideas. I didn't say it out loud, but mentally I was screaming, I'm not boring, sweetheart. Oh, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying your mind leans toward details, and writers wrestle with life's bigger questions. But I kept that thought to myself. I could tell when I was being gently pushed away. I'm sure you'll do great, she reassured me. Later that night, after Karen had gone to bed, I got online and pulled up our phone records. AT&T offers that feature. Every incoming and outgoing call, along with text messages, are logged. I scanned through the phone log, and the call I'd interrupted wasn't with Reggie, it came from Frank's phone. It's shocking how quickly trust can crumble after a quarter-century of marriage, when you catch your wife lying and realize she's making plans to exclude you. Weeks went by, and she seemed consumed with talk about the workshop. I tried several times to discuss the idea of going with her or visiting at some point, but she dismissed the idea every time. Then she shifted from rationalizing to manipulating. AB, I've got the most exciting news. I got 2 tickets for you and Jake for a fishing camp up in northern Canada at the end of June. You can take Jake and enjoy catching those big brown fish you always talk about. It was kind of pricey, but I wanted to show my appreciation for your understanding about the writing workshop, and I felt a little guilty that you wouldn't be having any fun, so I want you to go and enjoy yourself. Then we can share our experiences when I get back. I suspected something wasn't right. Thank you, sweetheart, I'll think about it. Honestly, I'd rather have fun with you, AB. We've been over this. It just doesn't make sense. I'll be working the whole time, and I'd feel bad neglecting you like that. I briefly studied her face and eyes, trying to read what I saw. Was it condescension? Thank you, sweetheart. Canada sounds fun. My tone lacked enthusiasm. In my mind, I was mapping out my options, and a surprise trip to Illinois was at the top of the list. It seemed like she was deliberately trying to make sure I wouldn't be around while she was in Illinois. I don't think you've been completely honest with me, and I'm starting to question whether you've been entirely faithful, AB. I never treated you this way, and I would never be unfaithful to you. What happened to you? You're my husband, and all I want is for you to have a good time. It really hurts that you'd think that of me. I can't control how I feel or what triggers those feelings. You know I love you. I've loved you since the day we met. But I can't just ignore the thought of betrayal. Is that what you're planning, Karen? Is this writer's workshop your escape from our marriage? That was the end of our conversation. There was no more understanding or affectionate dialogue. She erupted in yelling, and the rest of the night alternated between her shouting or complete silence. The following week, it was just silence. She was using the silent treatment as a weapon to force me to back down, trying to get me to yield. But it didn't work. In fact, it only strengthened my resolve. Still, I realized I wasn't making progress that way, so eventually, I let her believe she had won. If she was planning to cheat, there wasn't much I could do to stop her. The phone call I had overheard even suggested she might have already done it. Eventually, I thanked her for the Canada trip, but my mood stayed dark, and only improved once the trip was over. As soon as she got what she wanted, she quickly shifted her attitude and acted like a loving wife again, trying to reinforce the behavior she wanted from me. It was like she flipped a switch, and that only deepened my suspicion. I recognize manipulation when I see it. The writer's workshop in Illinois was about 300 miles away, and I didn't know anyone there. I asked a coworker who he turned to when he suspected his wife was cheating. I followed his advice and contacted the person he recommended, who, coincidentally, was based in Illinois. I asked for their help. The location of the workshop worked in our favor since it was held on a state university campus. While the investigators couldn't attend the program, they were free to roam the campus and monitor the dorms as needed. Participants dined in the campus dining halls, visited local bars, and stayed in a large dormitory with other students, an ideal setup for discreet surveillance. Some of those students, equipped with advanced tech, would be working for me. Since the academic year was ending, our daughters chose to stay on their campuses over the summer to work in research labs with their professors. That meant we were still empty nesters, and I made a conscious effort to reconnect. I cooked her dinners at home and took her to several shows. She seemed to enjoy it all, and I started to believe we were making progress. But whenever I expressed my love for her, I could sense a dismissive attitude. Slowly, the puzzle pieces came together. It wasn't that she had stopped loving me, she just took me for granted. I was familiar, reliable, her safe harbor. She felt secure in the belief that she could leave, chase excitement, take a break from our marriage, and I'd be here waiting when she got back. That realization solidified my plan. On the day she left, I realized I couldn't let her go without saying what needed to be said. We stood by the door as her airport van arrived. I held her tightly. I expressed my love and pleaded, "Please don't do anything that could destroy us." In response, she gave me an annoyed look and snapped, "I'm tired of you not trusting me. When I get back, we're going to have a serious conversation about this." She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, grabbed her bags, and walked out to the van. She didn't look back. At that moment, I knew my marriage was ending. After 25 years and raising 2 daughters, our relationship was slipping away, without much noise or drama. The private investigator did his job effectively. According to him, they didn't bother hiding their actions. Being in an unfamiliar place gave them a sense of freedom. When Karen arrived at the workshop, she had already removed her wedding rings, likely on the plane. They were absent from her finger. She openly claimed to be recently divorced, and from that point on, she and Frank were inseparable. They were constantly together, holding hands, kissing, acting like love-struck teenagers. My investigator cleverly placed a small video camera in the dormitory hallway where they stayed. Although Karen and Frank were assigned separate rooms, they only used one, sometimes hers. They spent many nights together. I already suspected what was happening behind those dorm room doors, but my investigator and his team went to great lengths to confirm it. One evening, just before dark, my wife and Frank turned in early. Two operatives, posing as typical college students, sat against the hallway wall and discreetly slid a tiny fisheye camera under the door. The device captured a 20-minute video of Frank in action. The video quality was shockingly clear. And when it was over, it was evident he hadn't used protection. That was the final straw for me. My decision was made. I was done. Whatever else the team discovered was just additional evidence to reinforce my stance. My investigator kept me regularly updated, but after that first week, her fate was sealed, and my mind was made up. Especially since I had already transferred the ownership to her, though she wasn't aware of that detail. When she returned home, the "for sale" sign would be the first thing she'd notice. I changed the locks on the house so she would feel less at home. I selected certain photos from her trip, including explicit stills from the video recorded under Frank's door, and compiled a copy of the private investigator's report. I left all of it on the dining room table to make sure she knew her actions had been uncovered. Most of my belongings had already been taken by the movers, who would store them until I was ready. I was only carrying 2 suitcases, my briefcase, my laptop, and my guitar. My guitar was essential. I couldn't trust something so precious to anyone else. Even though Frank might be sharing a bed with my wife, I deeply loved my guitar. My original plan was to leave the next morning, knowing she wouldn't be home until later that night. That way, I'd already be gone when she arrived. But I changed my mind the night before. I wanted her to feel the pain immediately, even if I could only imagine it while she was still with him. I sent her an email with 3 carefully selected photos of her and Frank, along with a single word, divorce. The first photo showed them on the dance floor, nearly intimate, clearly revealing she wasn't wearing her engagement or wedding rings. The second showed them entering his bedroom hand in hand. The third was a screenshot from the dorm room video, unmistakably showing her face. I anticipated she'd see these images and hoped they would taint her last romantic night with Frank, as they frantically searched for cameras that were already long gone. Then I turned off my phone and walked away from the house that had been our family home for countless years. It was a mix of pain, uncertainty, and a newfound freedom. It felt like the most challenging, uncertain, and liberating moment of my life, all at once. In a way, my wife had vanished from my life. I didn't know when or why, but it felt as though she had died, even though I hadn't caused it. The woman who now resembled my wife was a stranger to me, someone I didn't recognize and had no desire to reconnect with. I was beginning a new chapter, stepping into the unknown. Amidst the deep sense of loss, there was a strange feeling of release. The weight of disappointment, betrayal, and diminishment was lifted from my shoulders, even if only temporarily. The only cost was that half of my life was now inaccessible. Even though it was late, my mind was racing, so I drove about 100 miles, 160 kilometers, along a quiet highway, lost in thought, until I found a hotel for the night. I wasn't looking for a chain hotel. I wanted something authentic, a place with a real breakfast. Eventually, I found one and enjoyed what might be my last plate of grits for a long time. As I savored those grits, my thoughts shifted, and I began to reconsider my journey to Maine. This marked the beginning of my restart, and I had a long road ahead. I could have rushed my trip to Maine, running away from my problems, but I had a 2-month window before work began. Why hurry? I needed time to settle my thoughts, come to terms with her betrayal, and leave the past behind. I decided to take it slow, to appreciate the landscape as I traveled north, interacting with each state and its people along the way. This week would be my transition from my old life to the new one. I intended to indulge my senses, including my taste, to cleanse myself of the ugliness and mistakes of my past and prepare for a new beginning. I spent the rest of that day wandering around Williamsburg, moving through the summer crowds. I explored the work of skilled craftsmen, and even without a reservation, I managed to find a place to stay. Only after a light dinner and settling in for the night did my thoughts return to my failed marriage. By that time, she was probably arriving home. I wondered how she would react to the for sale sign in the yard, and the realization that her keys no longer worked. The next day, I headed north, driving through back roads toward Annapolis, the capital of Maryland. I passed through small towns and historic plantations along Virginia's ancestral rivers, the York, Rappahannock, and Pamunkey, all flowing into the Chesapeake Bay. There was a stretch of road ahead that was guiding me toward my future. I would follow that winding path as I left betrayal behind and moved toward a new chapter in my life. Update 3. I was sitting in my hotel room in downtown Annapolis when I finally turned my phone back on. As expected, it was flooded with missed calls, emails, and text messages. Most were from Karen, some from friends. I read and listened to all of them, though it was difficult. But it was a necessary step. At first, Karen tried to convince me that things weren't what they seemed. These were the messages she sent from Illinois before returning home and seeing the rest of the photos and reading the private investigator's report. Meanwhile, my friends were updating me that Karen was contacting everyone she could in an attempt to find me. She had no idea she was looking in all the wrong places. Jake and his wife knew where I was, but I had intentionally kept everyone else in the dark. I would tell them once I got settled. I already knew I couldn't stay a ghost forever. The 2 calls that worried me the most were from my daughters. Karen had reached out to them, trying to find out where I was. I had purposely not told them about my decision to leave their mother because I wanted to do it face to face. However, I couldn't leave them worried, so I spoke to both of my daughters and calmly explained the situation. They were upset and found it hard to believe their mother could do something like that. So I sent them the same photos I had sent to Karen the night I left home. I listened to all the messages as the world kept spinning around me without pause. I was informed that Karen had officially been served with the divorce papers. Now she knew I was serious. Additionally, the lawyer shared that Frank's wife had received a full set of photos, videos, and audio recordings from his 6-week workshop. A little karma for Frank. Continuing my journey, I drove through northern Maryland and, with great anticipation, finally reached New Jersey. Well, not exactly. I crossed into New Jersey but didn't stop until I arrived in Connecticut. Once in Connecticut, I spent a few hours exploring some historic towns along the coast. I didn't have a specific destination in mind, but the architecture was so different from what I was used to in North Carolina that I felt a strong sense of being somewhere completely new, both physically and emotionally. Don't tell the government, but I spent an hour in Groton trying to spot as many submarines as I could. Those blackfish are pretty stealthy. As I stared out along the coast, I remembered that when they refuel those nuclear submarines, they cut a hole into the hull to reach the reactor, then weld the hole shut again. Could that be a metaphor for my situation? Karen's betrayal had carved a hole in my heart. Was that hole the first step toward revitalizing my life? Could I truly heal once I fully embarked on my new journey? When I woke up the next morning, I knew it would be the most challenging day so far. After a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, toast, and a strong cup of black coffee, I braced myself for a difficult conversation with my oldest daughter, Claire, at Brown. The drive didn't take long, and I arrived at her dorm by late morning. We decided to postpone the talk for a bit so she could pretend to be excited to see me for at least an hour or two. She gave me a campus tour and then took me to the cafeteria, where she introduced me to her friends. They were exactly the kind of people I had hoped she'd surround herself with, friendly, thoughtful, and seemingly supportive of one another. On the way back, I spoke to Claire's roommate and gave her a heads up that it would be a hard day. I asked her to look after my daughter, and she replied, "Of course, Mr. Baker. She told us last night. We've got her back." Yes, my daughter had chosen her friends wisely. Claire and I spent hours in her dorm room having a long, emotional conversation. I shared photos and played audio recordings I never thought I'd have to share with one of my children. Her emotions fluctuated between sadness and anger. "I can't believe Mom would do this. Is she even the same person who raised us? What kind of disgusting person has she become?" she vented. I had to step in at that point, even though I understood how she felt. "Claire, no matter what she did, she's still your mother. And remember, I'm the one she betrayed, not you." "I'm sorry, Dad, but she destroyed the only family I had." "Of course this affects me," she responded. I couldn't disagree with that. Throughout the afternoon, we continued talking, and I outlined my plans for the future. I encouraged her to gather her friends, and we went out to dinner at the best place in town, or at least the best within my budget. Everyone seemed to enjoy the break from the usual cafeteria food. I shared stories from my own college days, and I think it gave them a new appreciation for their current experience. I stayed at a local hotel that night, and the next morning, I had breakfast with Claire before heading to Boston to repeat the process. Claire must have informed Denise, because her reaction was far more composed than her older sister's. There was still disappointment and anger, but less shock. She asked to see the evidence, and I showed her. Coincidentally, her mother called while we were talking, and I made the universal "I'm not here" sign, shaking my head, making frantic gestures, and miming a throat-cutting motion. She got the message. Denise had always been the most level-headed in the family. Then she did something I never thought I'd witness. She said, "Mom, you called Dad last night, didn't you? Is it true that you've become a woman who cheats on her husband and lies about it, hooking up with multiple partners?" I was stunned. I wanted to scold her for talking to her mother that way. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the truth in her words. "You heard me, Mom. You spent 6 weeks getting involved with someone else while Dad was alone at home. Was it worth it, Mom? Was it worth losing your marriage over?" My daughter has an incredible way with words. Note to self, don't end up on her bad side. There wasn't much more to discuss. Denise told me her mother was mostly in tears and trying to offer excuses. But my daughter wasn't buying any of it. It was becoming increasingly clear that my idea of turning into a ghost was just wishful thinking. A lot of people cared about me, and that was certainly a good thing. I went through the rest of Karen's text messages and listened to her missed calls. Eventually, she confessed, although her confession was mixed with bizarre outbursts of anger. Somehow, she still managed to blame me for her actions and for everything that had happened. Honestly, it was just ridiculous. I texted her and said I'd call the next day at noon. It had to happen sooner or later. Let's just say the conversation was far from satisfying. She fluctuated between guilt, denial, and excuses. She said she was sorry, but Frank's influence had been strong. I was suffocating her. It was my fault because I worked too much. She even had the audacity to claim that nothing serious had happened between them, that they were just messing around. I almost laughed when she tried to convince me she was simply seeking creative inspiration. She went as far as accusing me of turning our daughters against her, as if her own actions hadn't done that all on their own. When she finally stopped talking, I laid it all out plainly. You conspired with Frank to betray me, resisted every attempt I made to save our relationship, carried on the affair, and now you're facing the consequences. I don't care why anymore. When I hung up, she was still crying and begging. But I was done. There was no going back. I knew too much. I found a simple but comfortable two-bedroom apartment in an older building, conveniently close to the office. I figured I could use the exercise of walking, and at first, I thought it would be temporary, but my perspective changed quickly. Living simply in the city, avoiding all the extra responsibilities that come with owning a house, and having a small coastal cottage for weekends started to sound like a pretty good plan. And then I thought, why stop at a cottage? Why not get a boat, keep it moored at the harbor, and make that my weekend escape? By the time I settled all of that, it was early fall. I had expected to live a lonely life, but it didn't turn out that way. In fact, I spend more time with my daughters now than I did when I lived in Raleigh. They visit one weekend a month, often bringing friends along. During those 36 hours, my apartment is full of life, and we usually go out to dinner. When they leave, I miss them, but I also welcome the peace and quiet. Surprisingly, a few of my friends have visited me too, and others are planning to come once the weather improves. I'm living alone, but I don't feel lonely. I've made new friends at work and through my adventures. The sailing community is lively and welcoming, and I've met some interesting women. Still, I've chosen to remain respectful and well-behaved until the divorce is finalized. Although the divorce is nearly official, Karen still contacts me. She never truly regrets anything, she prefers to downplay it all. She says things like, everyone does it. It doesn't mean anything. But it does mean something. Intimacy carries weight. And deception and manipulation matter even more. I considered explaining this to her, but people change, and I no longer see the point. Truthfully, my life will never be completely separate from hers. With 2 daughters and many mutual friends, a clean break is unlikely. Still, with 600 miles between us, I no longer live with the daily pain of rejection and betrayal. She used to be the center of my life, until I stopped being the center of hers. Now, I'm charting my own course and building my own future. A lot of good has come out of this. For one, I truly enjoy living here. I'm going through my first winter in Maine, and while it's a bit of a shock, if everyone else can handle it, so can I. The early darkness up here makes indoor gatherings feel warmer and brighter. I've started looking for a boat and found a spot with moorings not far from town. I'm already looking forward to spring, mending lines and applying varnish. The local restaurants are great, the microbreweries are fantastic, and the people are genuine. There's music, dances to learn, like contra dancing, and I keep discovering new surprises. I truly believe life is going to turn out just fine. Is my heart fully healed? Not yet. But time has a way of mending wounds, and I'm confident that a better life awaits. Oh, and one final note, turns out Frank's wife is just as old-fashioned as I am. She kicked him out and filed for divorce. And even better? Neither Karen nor Frank have managed to get any of their books published. Reddit Relics comment. This story is a powerful reminder that even after the deepest heartbreak and betrayal, there is always a path to rebuild and be reborn. Watching a man emotionally shattered find the strength to start over, form new bonds, and rediscover his own worth is truly inspiring. Pain may knock us down for a while, but it should never define us. In the end, the truth comes out, real connections remain, and life moves on, stronger and more authentic than ever. And so, we've reached the end of another emotional story. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories from Reddit. Until next time, this is Reddit Relics, where every story has a side no one dares to tell.